This is part 2 of how Errol Spence deals with lateral movement. Last time was more of an aggressive form of lateral movement, in which I give an example of Sean Porter using lateral movement to set offensive traps and to do damage, basically. This is a more evasive or defensive lateral movement, somebody who's trying to circle the way to avoid Errol Spence and not take any damage themselves. And so we'll start off with how he uses the jab to track down his opponent. This uses kind of like a tracker to keep a hold of where their position is at all times. He's kind of using it there to cut him off too. I should clarify, it's not necessarily just the jab, it's the lead hand in general. So pay attention to how he puts this hand out here. And he uses it to track him down and land that left hand. Pay attention to that lead hand. His most used combination from the outside is the 1-1-2 or 1-2 to the head or body. And sometimes it's a 3 or a 4, but when he's stepping in from the outside, it's usually going to be a 2. And so there's a couple reasons he uses that, but in this case, we're going to go over him using it to back his opponent up against the ropes. And if he feels like he can cut off your lateral escape, he will throw a hook to do so. So sometimes he'll use the 1-1-2 or 1-2 to back you up against the ropes, but generally, in most cases, it's going to be just to close the distance in general. And so even more so than when his opponent is up against the ropes, when they're in open space, it's not necessarily going to be a 1-1-2. You saw a lot of times it was an uppercut, a lot of times it was a hook. It's really just a 1 backhand or a 1-1 backhand, double jab backhand. So he mixes it up depending on the context where he thinks your guard is going to be, the distance, things like that. And so it's really just a 1-1-2 backhand to close the distance to set up other combos and stuff like that. Now here's what we talk about danger for Spence. And so when he feels confident and he feels like he can rush his work and he feels like he's in positions to start doing what he wants, he can get a little bit sloppy with his defense, leaving some openings. So like a lot of times he'll step in behind the jab and he'll lower and load up on that backhand because he feels like he can get the leverage on it because his opponent's not necessarily looking because they're blinded by the jab. But that doesn't mean that the opponent can't still time him. And so they both land on each other there because his right hand is down and he was loading up on his left hand. So he left a lot of openings there. And so just because we're slowing it down in real time doesn't mean that it can't be capitalized on in real time, because it has been. And with Crawford, if he's not careful and if he's not patient enough, it will be. This is what it looks like in real time. And it's not just leaving openings in his guard, it's also overextending sometimes. And look how off balance he is right there. And then it leaves the opportunity for Algieri to clinch. It really could have left the opportunity for him to attack, but Algieri was in a bad position himself. So in the very beginning, I talked about him getting the opponent against the ropes. And now we're going to break down some of the things he does when they're against the ropes to hold them there, because obviously the opponent's trying to escape. And so this hand right here, pushing on the guard, pinning it down. Subtle controls. And then this right hand holding down the head so that he can't get up. That's a little bit illegal. But then he pins him with the forearm against the guard. Then he pins him a little bit more. And then uses the jab to track him down, hold him in the corner. Uses the forearm again to pin him against the ropes. Using his shoulder, putting it up against his head, and using that arm to control any escape on that right side. Using the jab to hold him in place again. Cutting him off. It's a lot of subtle manipulation and grappling and usage of his shoulders, forearms, hand, wrist, everything that he could possibly use to hold the opponent in place and stop them from moving so that he can get off all the work he needs to do damage. A common thread throughout the Spence and Crawford videos is the idea of respect. meaning that Crawford has to earn Errol Spence's respect and Errol Spence has to respect Crawford. That's a common thread, meaning that Errol Spence, like I said before, sometimes he rushes his work, he gets a little bit too defensively irresponsible, and when he's trying to chase down an opponent, it can cause him to run into shots. See, because he put that probe out there thinking he was going to get some more work in, and he ran straight into a cross, because sometimes he can be a little bit too predictable. And when he's opening up, it's sneaky shots that sometimes you don't see, because he does a good job of not reacting to them. But there's shots that's there. There's shots that's landing in between his combinations. And Algieri's not really an aggressive dude, so he's not the best example of how somebody's going to counter him in that exchange, like Crawford is likely to do. The last thing we're going to talk about is his predictable entries, meaning that the opponent knows the type of stuff he's going to do to try and get into punching range. And so somebody said it's discipline, not predictability. I'm like, they're not necessarily, they're not mutually exclusive. Like, his repetitiveness and his consistency is one of his greatest strengths. But if you do it to the point where it becomes predictable, it can become one of your greatest weaknesses, especially versus somebody who's going to adapt and find the timing. And so here, that predictable entry gets him caught with a clean right hand. He expects the jab, he slips it, catches him with a right hand. And so in this particular video, I don't have too many examples of Spence getting caught that much, but in the Kell Brook vid I did, so if you want to see that, go ahead. But this isn't a hate towards Spence. It's not a hate towards Crawford when I show Crawford getting pieced up or I show Crawford getting hit with big shots. The point is that both of these men are vulnerable. Both of these men have their weaknesses. For Spence, he's at times too predictable. He's at times defensively irresponsible. And so in this particular video, that's what I wanted to point out, is that when he starts getting a little bit too comfortable, when he starts getting a little bit too confident, he thinks he can beat you up, he thinks he can finish you, he starts making mistakes. However, I think the key for him is going to be being patient early on, being patient throughout the fight, to be honest, but being extra patient, extra cautious, and trying to mix up his entries, trying to do stuff that he isn't too repetitive so that he doesn't get time. And so I think that's going to be one of the keys for him to dealing with Terrence Crawford, because Terrence Crawford's going to try and set traps. Terrence Crawford's going to be evading a lot of his shots, and Spence can't get frustrated, and Spence can't make too many mistakes. That's the key. Immortality Serum out.
How can I die if I'm immortal? Monster in my eyes, I'm immoral. I ain't got no time to be cordial. Ripping up shit, I'm making big decisions. I'm feeling fire and important. Lightning striking and torching all of my rivals.